What's going on, everybody? My name is Louis Kobetz, and I am a filmmaker and photographer based in Louisiana, and I'm here to tell you why I sold my Sony A7 III for the Fuji X-T3.
Brandon and Molly have consented together in this holy union before God and before this assembly. Therefore, by the ordinance of God, I pronounce that they are husband and wife according to God's good and holy design. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you for the first time, Mr. and Mrs. Brandon Temple.
Now, before we get started, I think it's only fair to let you know that I am only using this Fuji X-T3 for wedding filmmaking. I previously shot on the Sony A7 III and really was blown away by that camera when it was released. Before that, I was shooting on a Canon C100 Mark II, which is a big, bulky cinema camera that really was a workhorse. The Sony A7 III was an excellent camera for me, but it really did lack in quite a few departments. Of course, it had excellent autofocus and excellent battery life that really could go all day on 2 batteries alone. But what really drove me to decide to sell the Sony A7 III was its image quality. At the end of the day, we are producing films, and films are moving images. And I want to have the best image quality possible for what I'm paying for. With the Sony A7 III, I just wasn't getting that. The color science was really nothing special. It wasn't as bad as the Sony A7S II or the Sony A6500, but it really just was nothing to write home about. Also, the image was always muddy. It was always unsharp and really just had a bit of noise added to it anytime I would do any grade to the footage. As soon as all of these cameras that shot 4K at 60 frames came out, I really became intrigued. When the Fuji X-T3 came out, I purchased it almost immediately, but was hesitant to use it for wedding films solely based on the lack of ability to simultaneously record to both card slots. As I shot a couple more weddings on the Sony A7 III, I really just began to be disappointed with my overall image quality. I felt that it was lacking severely, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to invest in something that was going to be the best possible camera for me at this time. I looked at the Panasonic S1. I was even thinking about doing the GH5 again, even though it was not the best in low light. It ultimately came back to the Fuji X-T3 after realizing that adding an Atomos Ninja 5 with an SSD allowed me to record a simultaneous backup to the Atomos Ninja. Another important thing that really sold me on the Fuji was the incredible autofocus system. Sure, it is not quite as good as the Sony A7 III, which in my opinion is without a doubt the best autofocusing camera on the market. Far better than the Canon dual pixel autofocus, which people are going to be absolutely crushed when they hear that. But the ability to have a small, teeny tiny box, I'm telling you, the box can pretty much focus on my finger. If I put a box right here, it would perfectly focus on my finger by moving that little focus area right on my finger. That's something that the Canon really lacked. It had large autofocus area boxes, similar to the Fuji X-T3. I would honestly say this is on the same level as the Canons with their dual pixel autofocus, mainly because you're not allowed to have the really small focus areas and get fine, minute focusing. It relies on a much larger area, so there can be times where it changes focus because there is something that's in the box that is at a different focal distance that it decides, hey, this is in the area, let's focus on that, which can ruin quite a bit of shots. Now, autofocus is not everything, guys. If you're relying on autofocus all day, every day, you are doing it wrong, in my opinion. Autofocus is never going to be 100% accurate. So just be wary of using autofocus all day. Make sure that you can find critical focus. Sometimes what I like to do is use the autofocus, and then once it's gotten focus, I switch over to manual focus. Now, with that being said, the autofocus system may not be quite as good as the Sony a7 III, but it is more than capable of producing excellent results. Another thing that I was very impressed with the X-T3 with was its low light performance. The ISOs that it really shined in were anything other than 12,800. I was so impressed with the low light performance, and I honestly felt like it was cleaner at all of those ISOs compared to the Sony a7 III. Now, there's a few drawbacks with the X-T3 that I will go ahead very quickly. Number one is battery life. I blow through 10, 12 batteries every single wedding. I always bring a power bank with a charger to charge the first 2 batteries that I consume, just in case I need 2 fresh batteries at the end, which will give me about an hour of record time. Another failing with the X-T3, like I said before, is that you can't record to both card slots simultaneously. I'm not really sure why Fuji has it this way. I feel like that's a very easy fix in a firmware to do, because it can already record photographs to both card slots. I'm not sure why it can't record video to both card slots, especially when cameras like the C100 Mark II, the a7 III can both do things like that. Now, the lenses on the Fuji X-T3 are really fantastic. Some of them are not the best for autofocus, but the 23mm f2, the 16 to 55 f2.8, and the 50 to 140 f2.8 are all the lenses you will ever need. They cover your bases from wide to telephoto, and they do them brilliantly. Every one of those lenses autofocus as well. They're extremely sharp, and they really just render a beautiful image. Without a doubt, the biggest issue with this Fuji X-T3 is the fact that it will overheat on you anytime you are in 70 degrees or higher weather filming in 4K at 60 frames. It takes 6 to 7 minutes to overheat when you're outdoors, anytime above that in sunlight. And when you're indoors, really about 12 to 13 minutes of record time. So take this into consideration. Saying that the Fuji X-T3 would overheat is really not that big of a loss for me, because I know that the Sony a7 III would do the exact same thing. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is why I didn't wait for something like the Sony a7S III. This camera is a camera that has been rumored for over a year, and no one has any idea when it will come out. No one has any idea what specs it will have, but I can guarantee you, regardless of what specs it has, it's probably going to overheat at 4K at 60. It's probably not going to have as good of color science as this Fuji, and it's going to be extremely expensive. So it was not worth the wait at all for me, especially when you can buy these new for $1,400. It's absolutely an incredible investment, and I'm very, very pleased with the results I've got from this Fuji X-T3 and have zero regrets with selling my Sony a7 III. Now, if you have any questions at all about these two cameras or any cameras that I've mentioned in this video that I've shot with, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. If you disagree with this, I totally understand. This is a very, very subjective conversation. My favorite camera is not going to be your favorite camera, so please keep that in mind. Thank you all for watching, and go out there and create some beautiful, stunning cinematic footage.